So this leads me to a segue, which I asked you off air if we could discuss it, and you were gracious enough to say yes. When you appeared recently on Joe Rogan, I think that came across. I mean, you were not happy and you were not going to have it. And I listened. So I was driving with my family. I was giving I was delivering a lecture in Ottawa, which is about a 2 hour drive from Montreal. And my entire family was with me, and that episode had dropped. So we listened to about the first 45 minutes, where I mean, the main gist of your point is, why do you bring these idiots who are spouting all kinds of nonsense? And so I put out a clip, and feel free to completely disagree with me here, although I suspect you might not. It was a very, very gentle critique. I can be quite spicy, but I have
Critique of me or of Joe?
no, it was me. So let me summarize what it was. I start off with Douglas Murray's coming on my show. I'm a huge fan of his work. We probably agree on 100% on all points. I couldn't imagine a better ally. I might have chosen a different stylistic choice in how I tackled Joe. I am appearing on his show. I might not want to sort of, although your moral indignation is perfectly justified, just the stylistic choice is one where you might lose some people that you otherwise want on your side because you made that. That was the entirety of my criticism of Douglas Murray. Otherwise, 100% on board with him. I think I got more hate from Jews because I dared to make that criticism, because their logic was Douglas Murray is a friend of the Jews. Your buddy Joe Rogan is inviting all these assholes. You're a fraud, Gad Saad. Number one, to dare to say something negative of how Douglas comported himself. And number two, why aren't you publicly disassociating yourself from Joe Rogan because he is the new Himmler? I thought that that was wrong. Am I wrong in thinking that that was wrong, Douglas?
There's quite a lot in that, Gad. I didn't see your video. Everybody always, I mean, it's like post-match analysis of any kind. Like everybody thinks they know how they would kick the winning ball, but in the end, it's you on the pitch, and it's as useful having people online saying, I would have done it like this, as it is, I imagine, for a Premier League footballer to be on the pitch and hearing people from from the stands shouting, "Kick it." Um, I was obviously trying to do several things there. I thought that the fact that Joe would only have somebody with my views on if he had the protection of his comic buddy was surprising.
Right.
I thought that it's surprising not least because just a week before he'd given this guy Dave free reign again on his show. And that's obviously Joe's right. He can have whoever he wants on his show, but it's strange that, he doesn't have to have somebody like that accompanied by a sort of babysitter, and that I must have a debate with the sort of two-on-one debate. I thought that was, I mean, I've been in plenty of skewed environments where, the whole thing is tilted deliberately against the position that I take, but, you have to do what you think's right. And I thought that I had to say, I think it was incumbent that somebody did say to Joe, I mean, well, first of all, to debate this comedian who's now appointed himself a Middle East expert. And well, that's its own story, I suppose. But I thought that somebody had to say to Joe that he's doing something different here. He's doing something different. It's not just asking questions at some point. If you're inviting on complete frauds and hucksters who are pretending to be knowledgeable about areas and in fact are pumping unbelievable sewage into the minds of listeners. And I don't think that's it's Joe can do what he wants, obviously, and will, just as you can or anyone else. But I can't not say that that is what has been going on. Like, just because we have had a period in which gatekeeping has become a problem and people use it as a problem does not mean you lift every sluice in the sewers of your society and let the shit just flow. And I'm afraid that's what I think is being done when people invite on completely unfunny comedians to talk about serious things and mislead people and then say, oh, well, I'm just a comedian. And I think that's exactly what you're doing when you're inviting pseudo historians on who then say, I'm not a historian, but don't demur when somebody introduces them as a historian. They just say they're not a historian when they're caught out on not knowing what they're talking about. And uh, I had to say this, Gad, because somebody had to say this. So many people owe their celebrity or whatever to going on Joe Rogan's podcast or being invited to his comedy stage. But um, I just I offered him a critique of what he's doing, and he can either, I suppose, accept what I think was friendly criticism, or he can double down. And I would love it if he accepted the friendly criticism and actually invited on people who could clean up some of the slurry that some of his previous guests have pumped around. And yeah, I mean, when you do these things, everybody has a view. But
Do you think so? And again, people are going to accuse me of trying to be too charitable to Joe because he's a friend and so on. But I'm really hypothesizing this with an open spirit. I think that Joe is the type of guy who is very inquisitive, perhaps at times to a fault when he is being inquisitive about hearing positions by people that are perfectly idiotic positions, to your point. But it comes from a mindset of, hey, let's talk about whether there is evidence that Bigfoot exists. Let's talk about whether in New Mexico they have aliens that have landed. He has that slash curiosity, slash slightly conspiratorial mindset. So could it be that all of these imbeciles that he's invited, Churchill is really the evil guy, not Hitler, Israel are the evil. Could it simply be coming from that reflex of, I just invite anybody who's got something interesting to say? Or are you suggesting, and again, I'm open to either positions that you might espouse, or are you suggesting that Joe has a nefarious agenda in inviting these folks?
I don't know. I don't like to create windows into people's souls. But I would just say that I think you can tell quite a significant amount from two things. One, if somebody went on Joe's podcast and talked about MMA fighting and turned out they had never been to a fight and they had actually got no understanding of the basic rules of MMA, Joe would notice and would not bring that person on again to talk about MMA. And I suspect his horseshit detector, which is pretty acute normally, would ring fairly early, and said person would be called out on the podcast for not knowing what they're talking about. So if that is the case with MMA or any other thing that is one of Joe's passions, why not when it comes to, for instance, the war in Ukraine or the war in Israel? Why not? Why not say, look, this is, if MMA is complicated, this is a lot more complicated. And maybe to understand this complicated thing, I should at least get a variety of people on and not just rely on self-styled comedians who are self-taught would be, know-alls about something. I think that is very telling. I think that if you have somebody on who believes that Hitler is the bad guy in the 20th century, sorry, that if you
Churchill.
have somebody on who believes that Churchill is the bad guy in the 20th century, maybe you should have someone on who knows about Winston Churchill and believes that, on balance, Churchill, good thing. I mean, some of this gets very serious. It's not important what a couple of comedians shit talk about each other about MMA, or probably about any number of other things. It is when you are vastly misinforming your viewers. And the second thing I would say about that, if I may, is there seems to be some kind of confusion about what is being what is what's I mean, I don't absorb this slurry, but I have friends who keep me vaguely informed about bits of it. There seems to be some kind of confusion online about my appeal to credentials or credentialism or expertise. And it's worth clearing that up because I said repeatedly during that podcast, during that 3 hours talking with these two or having to debate these two, I said repeatedly, anyone can say whatever they want. I'm not trying to stop anyone speaking. Good Lord, as if I could. You think I could shut up a bunch of comedians in Austin, Texas? But what I did say was that, again, just because experts have got things wrong many times does not mean that expertise does not exist. And that obviously is very clear where it exists, or it should be relatively clear in, for instance, STEM. We all recognize it exists in medicine. If you, Gad, were being wheeled into the operating theater to have heart surgery and comic Dave Smith popped doing the surgery today. Is that all right with you, Gad Saad? I think you'd say, actually, I'm not sure that your reading of a few Wikipedia articles and what you've heard from doctors is going to get us through. Okay, those are clear ones. Those ones are clear ones. But when it comes to journalistic standards, I notice that something else is happening. Joe could have acknowledged in the aftermath of that that a person like me who has put in the work, who has done the field work, done the groundwork, and written a book which I don't think Joe has yet had the courtesy to read, but which shows in considerable detail, I'd say, um, the what is a first-hand account of a conflict. I think that there should be a basic realization that in journalism, it is a norm to actually go to a place and report. And that is seen as being a good thing. It isn't to be laughed about or derided. And it isn't to be seen as being on the same level as somebody who has taught themselves by reading Wikipedia and anything that confirms their own biases. And I am, frankly, when you come to the question of is this good faith or not, which is effectively what you're asking, is I would say yes, right up until the moment that Joe and any of his friends and circle think that basic standards of journalism, like actually being in the place you're writing about, is to be derided and amateur hour conspiracy theory junk is to be lauded. That would be the time when it would fall apart. The media has plenty of problems. It has got plenty of things wrong. But there are basic standards in journalism that you are meant that people are meant to abide by. And I, at any rate, don't think that they're laughable. I don't think it's ridiculous. And I think that Joe and his circle of friends will reveal a lot about themselves and their intent as on whether or not they find, for instance, uh, a first-hand account of a war, like on democracies and death cults, to be something they contend with, or whether they pat themselves or their mates on the back hilariously for not knowing anything.
Well, I hope that you two, I don't know if the bridges have been burnt, but your voice
Not
is.
on my end. I never close the door entirely, and
Well, that's good to hear. So I was going to ask you, you haven't reached out to him or vice versa, not to turn this into a gossip session, but because I think that I did notice there was a clip that came out, I think a couple of days ago, where I think you're referring to it, where I guess he was with a comedian where they're sort of making fun of you didn't go there kind of routine. That can, of course, come across as a personal slight, Or again, not to be charitable, I know that he spent about 20 minutes with Bill Burr a few years ago making fun of my name and all kinds of stuff. It could just be good old-fashioned comedian ribbing. And the reason why I'm trying to
Yeah.
take a charitable, uh, you know, processing of the situation is because I know that Joe does unbelievable stuff and he brings on unbelievable people such as yourself. And to now have that opportunity broken, everybody would lose because we need to have your voice there. By the way, it's for the same reason that I told people, well, I went on Joe's show and defended Israel. Should I disassociate from Joe? How would that benefit the battle of ideas? So I hope that you guys resolve it.
Look, I agree. I have no beef with Joe, but I would like to know that he has actually taken what I write in this book seriously. Like, I'm not pissing around. I don't think this is funny. I don't think that the world is a studio in Texas and we just riff endlessly and things don't have much meaning. Um, I don't think it's a game. I don't think it's something to be litigated by comedians. Much as I love and have many comedian friends, I don't think they are able to solve many problems in the world. I think they can have a good time. But I don't think that the war I'm describing and have seen close up is about their amusement factor or their tolerance for bullshit or their desire to um, spark debate about weird things they haven't really looked into or just just riff. It's like I don't think the world's as funny as all that. I don't think it's as meaningless and as nihilistic as all that. I think there are things that very much matter, and if they matter, then you put in the work. And if you don't want to put in the work yourself, you at least listen to people who have. And if your job is to host, and if your job is to spark debate and so on, then get other voices on and don't have a babysitter. Like, have people who know about Hamas and the Islamic Revolutionary Government and Hezbollah and what they've done, and have people talking about the actual war from different perspectives. It's not like there's any lack of amazing experts and first-hand accounts or survivors or amazing people or soldiers or anyone else who could correct all of this slurry of misinformation. There are thousands of people I could point Joe and others to myself who could counter the one-sided rhetoric and who ought to be on and heard. Young women, young men of every imaginable background, and heroic people, actual heroes, not ringside heroes. And until such a time as I see the part of the orbit of that actually listening to the variety of voices they ought to listen to, and not just occasionally having somebody like me on babysat in a two-on-one contest. I'm My mind is not yet made up.